What's going on, everyone? Welcome to Decred in Depth. I'm your host, Angelo, and on today's show, we got some DCR devs in the house. We got Buck and John with me. They're working diligently on the DCR DEX. So, gentlemen, how you doing?
Good. Nice talking to you.
Doing well.
Of course. So let's talk about your background and how you guys got into DCR, and let's just go over the history of you two,
Sure.
Kick it off, Buck.
Sure, yeah. Well, I got into blockchain. Initially, I was just a broke college student doing a little GPU mining. But, I'm interested in technology. Blockchain tech is awesome, and I couldn't, hold myself back. And I really wanted to get into the nuts and bolts of blockchain. Started digging into it sort of as a hobby, took on a couple small personal software development projects. And that's sort of how I got into blockchain development, I guess. At the time, I was a graduate student, grinding out my graduate studies, slowly building a hatred for academia and modern research. And I kind of saw Decred, I found the Decred with its decentralized workplace. I saw it as a way for me to leverage my skill set and my interests without sacrificing my soul to the bureaucracy. And then I came to DCR data one day and put up a pull request, and I think it all just kind of went from there.
Yeah, I share some of those sentiments, especially the academia part. But I had some several years of programming experience in the medical device industry, so it was quite a large shift for me to get into blockchain, in Decred. But I think I heard about Decred, shortly before the testnet launched in early 2016. And before that, I had followed blockchain and Bitcoin developments, but I hadn't really felt like it was something that I would be contributing to until Decred, and that was partly because of I think Decred's approach to stakeholder governance and kind of a general sense of inclusivity that got me really interested in the project. So I kind of just went all in, and started contributing in one way or another. And I think one of my first big projects was DCR Data, which Buck just mentioned, the Block Explorer, and so much more than that. But I think we started really getting all in on Decred with the DEX. It got real serious, and that's where we are now.
Interesting. So we know that the DEX is built on atomic swaps. Do you guys want to go over that and break it down?
Yeah, sure. So simply put, an atomic swap is a process by which two parties can trustlessly trade different assets. So instead of a two-transaction process where, say, I send you Bitcoin and then you kind of cross your fingers and hope that you send me Decred, the atomic swap takes place in 4 different transactions where there's really no hope required. There's no trust required. And so now if you and I were to do a swap, it would operate as follows. So first, we would send our funds into 2 contracts, and these would be one on each blockchain. And these contracts hold the funds behind very nearly identical locks that require the same key to unlock and redeem the funds. So in concrete terms, the key is just some huge number, and the lock is built with the hash of the key. And these contracts still pay to the specific addresses of the corresponding counterparties, not just anyone with the key, but the same key is used in both of these contracts. And so the way it works now is that initially one of us knows this key. We call this the initiator, who starts the process. But redeeming the other party's contract involves revealing this key publicly on chain, which gives the other party access to their funds from your contract. So it's a pretty slick transaction that requires no trust between the two parties. And if for whatever reason, say the initiator decides not to redeem, there's a refund mechanism. So this is a sort of clause in the contract that enables the contract creator to get their funds back after a certain amount of time. So that's where the time lock comes in. So for example, if the initiator broadcasts their contract, but the other party goes dark, you'll be able to get your funds back after about a day. And you can have a similar failing if say both contracts are broadcasted, but you inspect the counterparty's contract and you say, oh, that's the wrong address, or the wrong lock time or funds or something, you can reclaim your funds without any trust of the other party. So really, the beauty of the technology is that the contract can be written on most major blockchains. So there's really no need for a third party or any intermediate, say, Ethereum token to facilitate the trade. And that just wasn't even the case a couple of years ago, and it is now. So that's basically the gist of an atomic swap.
Understood. So, with all the different decentralized exchanges out there, most of them built on Ethereum, what makes a DCR DEX different?
I think Decred DEX is the first to apply blockchain sort of core principles to the entire system. We're the first DEX, at least I think, that doesn't collect any trading fees, because the mere act of collecting trading fees is a centralizing force. We're open source software, which means anyone can run our DEX. While we do, I imagine John or I will eventually run a server. There is no Decred run server that everyone must go through in order to trade with DEX. If you want to run a DEX, you run a DEX. You open up a DEX to trade with your buddy if you want to. Our long-term plans even involve decentralization of the DEX server itself, so that running a DEX node would be kind of like running your typical blockchain daemon software, your DCRD or your Bitcoin D. And that would allow us to provide even more cryptographic guarantees, especially against censorship. In some sense, I would say the DEX, since it doesn't take an active role in performing any actual swaps, it really doesn't do much. If I would offer a one-sentence summary of what the DEX does, we help traders find each other and communicate, and that's pretty much it. Now, there's also some built-in features that we think make DEX just better. We try to mitigate some of the advantages that bots might have over human users. We do that with like this pseudo-random matching in short periods called epochs, rather than continually matching, and that helps to mitigate behaviors like wash trading. Because they carry more inherent risk, and we have a set of rules that sort of make it hard to spoof. And basically, if you're a bot, the DEX probably isn't going to work for you. And these are features that the casual user is unlikely to notice behind a good UI, but they're really quite empowering features.
Yeah, I think these are really good points, and I guess I kind of want to reiterate the bit about this being open source software, like first and foremost, because we got, I see a lot of questions on Twitter and here and there. Okay, so who's going to run it, or things like that. Things where the obvious sort of implication is they think that we're going to start the service rather than creating a software. And I mean, it's really what Buck was just saying. Anyone can run this, and I'd like to even see it be run in a networked sense, and I think we're planning that. But another important distinction is that Decred's DEX provides a built-in system to disincentivize undesirable behavior among traders. And basically, because of the atomic swap technology, your funds are never at risk of being stolen. But we also don't want people messing up the system by backing out of swaps or taking forever to broadcast transactions. So traders will have a clear set of rules that they have to abide by, and there's also going to be well-defined penalties should they violate the rules. And this is really made possible by just having a single one-time non-refundable registration fee that just enables the DEX to impose some kind of real-world consequence via account closure in the event of repeated abuses. So it's a different model for having this trustless, trade-free system while having some order. And now, part of the other question was, what makes the DEX different? Now, if you consider different to other DEXs, well, the answer depends on what DEX you're comparing to, of course. But just in general, I would say that many of the current quote DEXs out there are needlessly complex in the name of collecting trading fees or other kind of revenues. And typically you'll find third-party signers, arbitrators, escrow, intermediary tokens, even extraneous blockchains, and a myriad of other complexities, whereas the Decred DEX is very straightforward in that regard. So, to me, that's pretty much what summarizes what is different about the Decred DEX.
So now, do you guys want to go over some of the advantages versus using a centralized exchange?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's quite quite simple. I mean, the first is that, and the most obvious advantage is that you never have to relinquish control of your funds. You trade straight out of your own wallet and directly with the counterparty. So again, the Decred DEX facilitates communication to establish the terms of the contract. But by the time the first party broadcasts the first transaction, the process is totally in auto drive and overdrive. And the DEX's only role is really to just watch and make sure everybody does their part and keep that order that I was talking about. And then the other real advantage is that you never have to reveal any private information about yourself. And as far as the DEX is concerned, you're just, dang it. Sorry, guys.
No problem.
Someone was calling.
Go ahead, take it.
Yeah, so as far as the DEX is concerned, you're just a 256-bit number that paid a registration fee. So the DEX never holds or transmits any funds either, and it completely avoids the need for these privacy intrusive know your customer requirements. So just keeping control of your funds and personal privacy, to me, are the most powerful advantages of using the DEX versus a centralized exchange.
Now let's go over the disadvantages and what you feel.
Yeah. So, I like to manage expectations. I say that a lot, and I'm glad to have a chance to do that. The DEX does not have instant settlement. Everything happens on chain, so you got to wait for blocks on each chain to be mined in sequence. You have to, initially at least, you have to run your own full node software, and that means you'll need to sync Bitcoin to use DEX. But you can enable block pruning, so you don't have to store, all 300 gigabytes of the blockchain. So, but I think those are very manageable disadvantages, and they're not very significant in the name of privacy and control of your funds.
Yeah, I think for just to add to that, I think that for the typical trader, for the typical human trader who's not there trying to day trade for a living, who's not trying to, run about, I think most of the disadvantages are insignificant as far as how it differs from their normal trading experience. Now, if you're someone who trades a lot, you might notice those things, but I think for what I'll call a normal person, maybe our target audience, the disadvantages are almost inconsequential.
So when you say you have to run a full node of BTC, and this is a little bit off here, describe that. So what kind of wallet can you use? Can you use like an Exodus, or can it be like a light client wallet for BTC, or does it have to be?
Well, not yet. We're targeting, Bitcoin Core software right now. But I don't know, maybe Buck wants to say more, but we're looking towards SPV light wallet support.
Yeah. The initial release will be, Bitcoin D wallet and DCR wallet are the required sort of daemons that you need for that. SPV has already been under discussion for a long time. I think it's going to be one of our main priorities after this initial sort of release cycle. And that I believe Bitcoin D is pretty close to even having a light wallet built in at some point. I know that they've been working with their light filters and they have a lot of support for that now. But SPV is definitely on our list for one of the very first things we want to do. So the options for wallets should open up pretty quickly.
Understood. So just simple. What's the main use case for the DEX? I know some may be expecting something different.
Yeah, I think we're sticking to the basics. If you have some coin and you want a different kind, come to the DEX and trade. Initially just Bitcoin and Decred, but an ever-growing list, hopefully. On the other hand, if you have your On the other hand, if you have your Hyperbot 2000 you're looking to deploy, I don't think you're going to do too well on the DEX, and we're trying to make sure it's that way, actually.
Understood. So what are some of the pairs that we could expect? I know we're starting off with DCR and BTC, but what else is even worth adding? I mean,
Yeah,
I don't want anything else, but
yeah, no, that's right. I mean, Decred and Bitcoin are definitely the first, as you said. I think what's clear is that we expect to see Litecoin quite soon after, because we actually used Litecoin as a proof of concept for our reusable Bitcoin protocol backend. So most of that work is already done. And really, any coin whose protocol is based on Bitcoin and has certain required scripting capabilities is actually relatively easy to implement and add. And we've already seen there are at least 10 coins in this category that were outed to our previous atomic swap software, a couple of years ago. So I'd expect to see those first if those communities have interest in doing so. But just generally speaking, the DEX code is structured to be completely blockchain agnostic. Meaning like it doesn't even have to be a UTXO based design. And then the secret hash algorithm is pretty ubiquitous. So really, most algorithms, most assets with some equivalent of hash time lock contracts are likely to be compatible already. So I think we're going to see a lot of assets added by other community support quite quickly. But just to name a couple specific applications, there's already been interest in expanding into Ethereum protocol assets, which we believe should be relatively straightforward. And in terms of getting that done, we're hoping that motivated Ethereum developers will step up. But that said, we're prepared to actually seek out expertise to make that happen. And to name one more specific application, Lightning Network interoperability is a possibility as well. And Decred has Lightning expertise as well as a working Lightning network. So I expect to see demand for both Decred and Bitcoin Lightning support in the future too. But personally, I see a lot of value, generally in having many assets supported by the Decred DEX. But in general, I'd like to see implementation efforts driven by the broader development community. That is, the developers for those other assets will sort of chip in and make this happen rather than Decred developers sort of footing that effort. And I think Buck, you wanted to share some thoughts on the value of other assets as well.
Yeah, you asked 10 people this question around Decred, and you probably get 10 different answers. For me, whether it's worth it to add more and more coins, I mean, it's a resounding yes. There's not even a question about it. There's something like $80 billion USD worth of cryptocurrency out there, and I want every single bit of that to be seamlessly interchangeable with Decred. So if you ask me the question, that's always going to be yes, we should add that coin.
Right, right. So, some people don't understand that these things take time. People complain about centralization all the time. When the privacy server came out, the privacy feature, they complained about the server. We're seeing Twitter act up about complaining about the same thing with the DEX server. What is your response, and how are we going to evolve out of that?
Sure. Well, to be clear, DEX is non-custodial and is not an active party in the actual trading. Trades are performed on chain, and they have all the advantages of blockchain decentralization. But that said, trading markets themselves are centralized at the DEX, and we don't really like that either. I think if you look at the development history of DEX, you'll see that it's really been on our mind since day one. Even in Jake's sort of seminal blog post about the DEX, he had a section titled Server Mesh that discusses this issue. Ultimately, the plan is to decentralize the DEX server itself. So volunteers would run a DEX node in much the same way that you currently run DCRD or Bitcoin D. The work of doing that is going to be a huge effort, but at Decred we have a lot of expertise, and I think we can get it done. And in some sense, we've already started that. The decentralization of the server has been a primary consideration in all of our low-level design discussions. So in some sense, we're already on our way to decentralizing the server. So, in short, we hear you, and we're on it. It's going to happen. We're really interested in the same thing, I think.
Interesting. So, what about the fees? Why are there no fees?
Well, the fee question is sort of nuanced, right? The Decred DEX collects no trading fees in that a given trade doesn't have a fee. However, there are, of course, going to be standard transaction fees. Those are the ones that are collected by miners all the time. And those are sort of unrelated to the DEX. So to make sure transactions are mined reasonably quickly, they have to be paid at some minimum rate. But again, these are not fees paid to the DEX. And the only fee associated with the DEX itself is that one-time registration fee, which is entirely used to essentially keep order to incentivize good behavior with respect to executing trades.
Right.
Yeah, so that's the short answer on fees, basically.
Got it. So what's the product going to look like? Is it going to be integrated into Decrediton? Is it standalone? How do you see it operating?
Yeah, well, the DEX server itself provides a JSON API over WebSockets. It implements a published specification, which means that any application can incorporate DEX functionality. As part of our release, we'll be releasing some client software written in Go that includes what I'm calling the core package. And that can be imported and used by any Go application to add DEX functionality. We're already using that core package in both a browser-based GUI and command line interface. So the core is hopefully going to be something that people find a lot of use for out there in adding DEX support to their products. As far as Decrediton, I haven't personally talked to them about DEX. I think John has just recently. But of course, I'd love to see DEX added to Decrediton. Trades require coordination with non-Decred wallets, though, so I'm not sure how that would work logistically. Maybe John can add to that.
Yeah, it's a little early to say whether or not Decrediton is going to have some kind of integration. It definitely needs a feasibility study, I think. But yeah, I was just chatting with one of the Decrediton devs today, and they're interested in investigating this. And as far as I can tell, what this means is you still would be running the DEX client, which is basically the wallet controller. And I think Decrediton could talk to the client, over its existing interface, and you could potentially place orders from Decrediton. But yeah, again, it's still kind of early, but it's something that even the Decrediton devs are looking into.
Got it. Now, closing out here, guys, what are your concerns for DCR in the future?
For me, not, just getting the word out there. I feel like Decred has one of the most active and competent dev teams in the space, and it just takes time to make the case and gain users. That's really all it is for me.
Yeah, I think I second that. Decred is it's superior tech. We've got the best devs around, and on that basis alone, I have very few concerns for where Decred's heading. I think we're gonna be doing just fine.
Got it. Now, with everything going on, what are you guys optimistic about coming up in the future?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much about Decred that I'm optimistic about, but the one fundamental thing is that I think the dev talent is only going to get stronger. The project, not only does it have funding, but it appeals to serious blockchain developers who have been wanting to make a real contribution in this space. And I think this is a good place for them to do that and see their work come to fruition.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm looking forward to Lightning Network and DEX reaching maturity. These are really disruptive, game-changing technologies, and no one has gotten them quite right yet. And Decred, I think, is really leading the way and will continue to lead the way in these areas. Mm-hmm.
Understood. Well, gentlemen, I appreciate you guys coming on the show. Do you guys have any closing thoughts and message to potential stakeholders?
Yeah, I mean, my message to stakeholders is sort of generic in the sense that it's not DEX specific. I would just say, with Decred, your opinion counts, literally, on chain. And the project has proven itself fully capable of delivering. And as a stakeholder, it's totally up to you what that should be.
Yeah, stakeholders. Yeah, I mean, DEX is coming in hot, and we're ahead of schedule. We're under budget, and we're just getting started. So stay tuned.
Appreciate it, guys.